Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next Champion Within conversations. I have two of my friends here that we met, I think, a couple of years ago, Dylan and Cassandra. I met Cassandra first on Instagram through my page, which was called Mental Health Talks at the time. It's now called Music and Mental Health. And I had reached out to her about a podcast that they were doing at the time, because I was really trying to get onto a podcast and do an interview to talk about my different issues with mental health and things that I've overcome. And at the time, it didn't happen, but we kind of communicated, and eventually I got on the show, and I think we had about 3 different discussions that went very well. And without further ado, here they are.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
I always think back to that moment of reaching out, because with Instagram, it gets kind of wonky and scary, right? Somebody's reaching out to you and saying like, hey, do you want to buy this? Or do you want to be an ambassador for this? Or, hey, I want to reach out to you for this. But your tone was different. Like there was something about, you asking about the podcast. It was very sincere and just something that you wanted to. And it wasn't until later that we were talking that you were like, I was even nervous about asking, but I took the leap of faith and I tried, and I was so grateful that you did. But at the time, I think we were in transition, right? Because we were moving from the apartment to my grandmother's house.
Yes, I believe so.
But then I'm like, we need people to talk. And there was this guy that reached out and he wants to talk about mental health. Let's do it. Because mental health, was and still is very important to us.
Absolutely.
And you're right. It's just something about the chemistry between us. Just, we were able to do 3, and they were all so comfortable. They were honest and open, and they were just fantastic conversations. So we're happy to be here to support you and with what you're doing, because you supported us. So thanks for having us.
Thank you. I mean, that's synergy, because these types of things that we were talking about in those discussions at that time were not things that I was commonly talking about. And I work in the mental health field. I've done so for the last 6 years. And even sometimes at work, I'm not discussing those types of things. We went through like childhood things that happened that I only talked about in therapy. And we went through like the Black Lives Matter movement and a rally that I had just gone to, a lot of different things. So yeah, I appreciated that friendship that we formed.
You're very excited to have a friend on the East Coast and to connect some like beyond our bubble.
Yeah.
And it's a scary thing, right? Especially when it comes to mental health, because it is so personal. And while mental health and discussions around it are starting to open up within not just specific communities, but multiple communities, it's still hard for people to come and talk about it. There's still that stigma around, like, I shouldn't be talking about this because people potentially will think less of me. And that was a big reason why we wanted to get on and start the podcast, is to destigmatize it. We're not anybody special. It was just something like getting on and just having that conversation and sharing that journey, so we could support others, and maybe others could hear our stories and say, okay, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to go to therapy. It's okay to have these feelings I'm having, but there's also light at the end of the tunnel. And there's always going to be that support. And I'm very lucky because, when it comes to Dylan and I was the one that had the severe depression. I had suicidal ideation, and he, as my support, was going through it on a different, point of it. So just kind of giving that perspective, I think, is very helpful. And there's not enough out there, and you're an ally because of that now, and you're a friend because of it. And even when we weren't communicating or recording a podcast, you and I were checking in with each other via Instagram. And that's huge, because the bigger support system you have, the more it's easier to find your way out of that dark tunnel, right? So it was nice to have another ally.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Instagram, because there's a lot of mental health pages out there, but there's not a lot of them that you communicate with and get a person. It's like they have made them really systematic to where they'll post a bunch of quotes and they'll repost a bunch of mental health related things, but you don't have a person there saying like, I have mental health issues. This is what I'm experiencing. I follow a lot of these pages, and they do give me plenty of good information that I connect with and repost, but I'm not connecting with a person. So in a way, it does help to have those things going out there, but in another way, it doesn't help to normalize talking about mental health issues, just like you were talking about with stigma. I think it's a very powerful thing to have somebody like you or myself saying, I deal with this and I'm still here, I'm still living. There's nothing crazy about me. And, I'm just a person who's going through the world and I deal with my issues and I'm still keeping it moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that you don't even realize that you could potentially even have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had a cousin reach out to me asking me about panic attacks because she had just recently experienced one. And she's like, I had no idea what you were going through. She had an idea because I talked openly about it with my family, and she followed me on Instagram too. So I was open about it on Instagram. But she's like, I never completely understood until now. And I told her it's probably something that's always been with you, but you just got so used to masking it that this is just a wave that's coming in. I'll just have to work through it. Self-care, put on that mask, keep going.
Yeah.
But at one point, you're just putting a cap on a bottle and still you're shaking it, and it's going to build and build, and you're going to explode. And unfortunately, she just got to that point for her where it came in the form of a panic attack. Mm-hmm. So, yes, like seeing those things on Instagram can be nice. And it's like, okay, there's people out there who are trying to do good. And while, I didn't reach out and talk to every single person, or vice versa, not everybody reached out to me and said, hey, can we talk about this? Or can I have that connection like you and I started talking? It's a different feeling when there is somebody you're actually talking to and you're able to connect with. So I really made sure to say, if you need anything, you call me, you text me, you let me know, because this is new. And inspirational quotes are great, and workbooks that you can buy off a shelf are great. But talking to somebody and connecting with somebody and having a support and ally is a huge difference. Makes a huge difference too, right? Like if I didn't have Dylan, I don't know where I'd be right now. And I tell people quite honestly and often that had I not had Dylan, who had been so understanding and patient and concerned, I don't think I'd be alive today, because I would not have had that support. I would have had family potentially saying, oh, you'll get over it. It's just a phase, just keep going. Just keep doing things that keep you busy type of things, just kind of what we always hear. And then, like I said, like I met you and the support just kind of kept growing. But it is kind of reaching out and taking that leap and saying, hey, can I talk to you about this with somebody you trust? And have them listen.
So I know we talked about this before, not here, but we talked about this before. What was it like for you two, for you, Cassandra, and you, Dylan, when you started having these symptoms? And how was it like when you were having these conversations? Was it smooth? Was there difficulties? You shook your head.
No, it wasn't smooth at any point. It was terrifying, pretty much throughout. And we were really feeling our way through every single step of the way. Like, we barely knew what was going on. We kind of were able to give these things names, like depression and anxiety and things like that, but we didn't really know what to do or how to get through it, or what all this stuff meant. But the thing that I think saved us from the beginning was the communication. Like, there were times that she was, and it was hard for her to tell me how she was feeling, because a lot of times she wasn't feeling much of anything, or she didn't know or understand how she was feeling. And to try to put that into words was very challenging and very stressful. But she would try all the time. And then I remember very vividly the day that you basically just said, like, I want to hurt myself, and that kind of honesty, that kind of openness, I think ultimately is what saved us, because the fact that she was able to verbalize those feelings, had she not, she probably would have just held on to it and kept thinking and thinking and thinking and maybe done something terrible.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember the exact moment in which we identified that it was depression. I do remember thinking, oh, this is what I felt with Isis, because I had postpartum depression after our youngest daughter was born. And so I was connecting the dots, but it wasn't like the little sparks weren't touching and connecting completely. But it seemed to be getting worse. And I was calling out from work because I just didn't have the energy. I was just sad and just numb all the time. And my work situation at the time was incredibly stressful. This was also a time when my mother was going to go through a kidney transplant. She had already had her liver transplant. She was going to get her kidney transplant. And then on top of that, I had offered to be an altruistic donor for kidney. So even though I wasn't going in with her because my sister was going in, I chose to continue on in the process. So that was an added stress. Not that I was regretting it or worried about it. It's just there's a lot to go into preparing for a major surgery like that. And then work is just constantly banging down on me. And there's a lot of pressures coming from the company, my leadership, my teammates, my cast members at the time. And it just all kept building. And I just felt this more of, I just don't want to do this anymore. It was helplessness. It was sad, deep sadness. It was anger. It was numbness. And I think the point when it started to get numb is when I was like, I'm just done. Like, I can't feel. So what's the point? You know, if I can't enjoy, if I can't feel happiness, if I can't be with my family 100%, then I'm useless. So why be here? So, and that's where those suicidal ideations came in. And Dylan is absolutely 100% right. Like, the communication, I think, is what helped us. And that's why we, especially when we have friends or family or just anybody who we talk about mental health with, we talk about communication. It's not opening up right away because we understand that can be incredibly scary. Like, I was in the unique position where my husband was very understanding. Not everybody has that. Not everybody has a partner that will listen and understand or try to understand, because he didn't understand 100%. He's not going through this. He just sees pain. He sees nothing coming out of me at one point, right?
Yeah, she wouldn't get out of bed.
And then there
She
was the
wouldn't talk to
guilt
me.
because I could see the person I love being hurt by not being able to help. Because how could he? I didn't even know how I needed him help.
Yeah.
So it just us talking. And, you know, I was going to therapy. I went to see a therapist, and that was going well for a while. And then on our last session, I literally came in as if it was my first day. And she was just like, you need to do more intensive work. And it blew her mind because I was taking steps in the right direction. And then all of a sudden it was a complete 180. So I did group therapy. I did individual therapy. I was on medication, which I was open to. Like, I was willing to try anything to help me get into a good place. Medication ended up not working out for me anyway. I'm not on it now. It was really hard getting off of it. But, you know, it's one of those things, like with medication, you have to be patient with. And not having insurance for a part didn't give me that choice to be patient with it. So I had to learn to find other coping mechanisms, which was a lot of talking and communicating with him. And working through those. So it's a long answer, but I mean, it's not an easy answer to give because there is so much that goes into it.
And just to add a tiny bit more, just from my perspective, like I was in the position where I was still going to work. She at one point actually even resigned from Disney. But every time that I would leave the house, it was a trigger for her, and she would go into depression when I was leaving. And so it put me in this position where I had to go to work because we had to make money. We had to support ourselves, but me going to work was causing the problem to get worse. So it was this no-win situation of every day making this decision to either, you know, call out and stay home and sort of take care of her, or go to work and try to take care of all of us and make sure we have, you know, a place to live and food and all that stuff. I mean, I literally, there were days that I did not know what I was going to come home to. And it's just a scary feeling.
Wow, that's deep. This is the second time I'm hearing this, but it's just as deep the second time as it was the first time. And you said, you know, we're nothing special. I think that that's a really special story that you have to have gone through something like that. Yeah.
What always gets me is like, I think the fact that we aren't anything special is why we kind of need to talk about this, because people need to know that just ordinary people deal with this. There was a person that I was talking to where I work currently, And she was telling me that she's going through the exact same thing with it's her father instead that's going through depressive episodes. And she's in that same position where he was usually the breadwinner, but now she's the one living at home who's paying all the bills because he can't work all the time. And she's having that same exact decision that I had every day of, do I stay home and take care of him, or do I go to work and get money? And so I was able to sort of talk through what we had gone through and just kind of the situation that we had. And same thing. She's not anything, she's not a celebrity. She's not anything special beyond, an important person in her dad's life. But she's going to be there for him and make those decisions. But me being able to talk to her, let her know that she's not the only person that's gone through this. And I think that's the key.
I totally agree. And that's actually how I became a peer counselor. I said, who am I in the mental health field? I didn't do that in school. I don't really have this tremendous psych knowledge aside from, things that I got secondhand from my therapist, things that they told me that I just retained and Google and books and things like that. But it's not like I got a whole psych degree or master's or anything like that. So what do I know? But I realized over some time, it's not about what I know, it's about what I've been through.
Yeah.
And just like you said, somebody can give you a lot of book knowledge. Okay, here's cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT. Here's the steps that you go through to get through this. Here's the meds that you take to get through that. But having somebody who's like, I've had this experience where I was in bed and I didn't have any kind of reason to live or motivation to get up, and I got through it, can be so powerful for somebody who's where you were. And even if you feel like I'm not far enough, if you think back to where you were at that time, you're like, I'm really far from where I was also.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I just lost my thoughts on that.
Well, I was going to tag on to that. Like, that's something that we kind of try to do every now and then, even now, is, when we're having those bad days or those bad mental health days, is to stop and think, like, look at where we were. Look at how far, look at how down you were. And yeah, we're down right now, but it's nothing like it was before. And not only that, but you got through that super, super dark period. This is bad, but it's not nearly that bad. We can do this. We'll be all right. And it gives a lot of reassurance.
Yeah, I remember my thought. My thought was, you don't realize how many folks around you are suffering until you start opening up yourself about it.
Exactly.
It wasn't until I started posting about my mental health and then mental health advocacy that I would have friends at work say, oh yeah, I had depression. When we would get on to do our
Twitch streams,
because we would get on and just play games and talk to people. Most of the time, the conversation was around mental health because we would explain why we were doing it to anybody new coming to watch the channel. And like, oh, I suffer from depression, or I suffer from anxiety. And, it's really cool that you guys are talking about it. And it just, there's more of us out there than we realize. And sometimes it's just that conversation and that openness to, again, I don't know how many times I could stress it and say it in a conversation, is finding that support and taking baby steps. Will the depression and anxiety ever go away? I can't promise that. I am in a completely different place than I was what we just talked about. I don't have those deep depressive thoughts anymore. And I do look back and, I have scars to look back and remind me of those times where it's really hard. But I see where I am now, and I see, the adventure that we've gone on from moving from one state to 2 states up and completely starting in a different life with, like, we have my father-in-law and his wife and, their son and daughter-in-law, but that's it. Like, I went from having all my family around me to next to none of my family around me.
Yep.
And that's hard too. And you think that would be triggering, and it can be very sad, and it can, the loss of my mother also recently, last couple months is brought back the sadness and the anxiety. But I know how to cope, and I know how to talk, and I know how to get through that. And I wouldn't have had I not opened up.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's just identifying those things that you do need, those things that help you get through those moments. And we're even still figuring that stuff out, but she knows now to tell me, like, hey, I need an alone day, or I need a couple hours to myself, or I need this, and we make that happen.
There's two things that I wanted to bring up, and I hope that when I bring up the first, I don't forget the second. But when I first got into therapy, I remember I was having panic attacks. So there wasn't really for me anything identifiable before that to make me think I had any kind of mental illness or anything like that. The panic attacks started, and I'm like, this is something going on with my body. So that's what happened when I went to the doctor. I'm like, something's going on with my heart or my lungs or something. I don't know what it is, but I need some kind of diagnosis. And when he's like, oh, that's just anxiety, here's some Xanax. I was like, anxiety? I don't understand. I didn't understand what it was and how it could just make me feel like I was about to die in a second. And so when he suggested that I go to counseling, I'm like, what is counseling going to do for this physical thing that's happening to me? So when I went into the counseling, I was very closed-minded. And I was like, so when does it end? That's what I want to know. When and how does this finish? Like, what's the end of anxiety disorder? What's the end of depression? And I thought there was an end. And when they didn't tell me there was one, I was out of there. I stopped going for months because I thought, this is just, I don't believe this. So I think I realized now, that was 8 years ago or so. I don't really think there's an end, but I just think that you learn what's going on with you and you get much better with being able to self-identify things that are going on in your life. And you've learned all these new coping skills and tools that you're able to apply to various degrees of situations from little to big. And I think that was leading me into the second part. It made you stronger, I feel. Those situations made you stronger. And if you didn't have that strength that you developed from those tough times back then, when you reached the tougher times now that you're experiencing, you would have probably crumbled. But we don't realize that we are being prepared for those situations.
Right. I was thinking as you're talking about how your comment about like, okay, well, when does this end? Like, how do I get past this? How do I heal from this? Like, what's the magic pill sometimes, you ask yourself with mental health. And there isn't, right? And you very clearly, like when they told you, like, this is something you could be living with for the rest of your life. I think we're conditioned to think, I know we are conditioned to think that way because anytime we've ever gone to the doctor, childhood up to adulthood, it's for a sickness that they give you medication for. They give you a vaccination for.
You break your arm, you set the bone.
Right. Yeah. I sliced my hand recently and now I have a scar that I had to learn how to use my hand differently because of it. And it's not necessarily going to be the same. It's not like this one wasn't bad. It wasn't like going to be detrimental to how I use my hand. But you break a bone, you have to give it time to heal. And then you have to go through the therapy process. Right. But even then, you're not going to be 100%. Mm-hmm. It is not going to be exactly how it was before you broke your bone. It's not going to be exactly how it was, your lungs, before you got pneumonia. I mean, everything in your body changes, and the brain and the mind are no exception. Once you trip and fall, and your brain trips and falls, you have to start the healing process. And that can take time, depending on the injury and how severe you are, and depending on how long it goes without being treated, right? Because if you let a broken bone go without being treated, your body is going to change according to that rate. And then there's going to be, in most cases, somewhat of a deformity. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to change your lifestyle around it. Mental health is the same way. If you don't treat whatever the symptoms are to get you to a better place, it's just going to snowball into something bigger and worse, potentially, for you. And that's why you have to remember to treat it like any other normal injury or sickness before it's too late. And some just don't realize that what it is. Like you were talking about the panic attack. You thought it was a heart attack. Mm-hmm. The very first time I had a panic attack, I thought I was having a heart attack as well. I thought I was going to die because it was just consuming and painful. And why is this happening to me? Mm-hmm. And then I go to the ER and they say, no, nothing's wrong with you. You're fine. They didn't even give me, oh, you're having anxiety.
Yeah,
They
it wasn't
gave me
even that.
nothing.
It's just,
They
no,
just
we
know
don't,
you're
we
fine.
don't know.
We don't see anything. Your
Fine.
test came back normal. Like, I almost died, and you're
Yeah.
telling me
Yeah.
that nothing is wrong with me. No, you need to go back and figure it out. I mean, even then, it was like weeks after until somebody said, oh, that sounds like a panic attack. What?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that up because you're right. You know, sometimes people come into mental health thinking, oh, there's a cure.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all I have to do is take a magic pill and it's going to be fine.
Yeah, and it's not so much a cure as it is a treatment.
Yeah. Two things I was going to say about that too. One is that really resonated with me. What a great example. And the reason why it resonated with me is because I spent months in physical therapy. And when people are like, are you better? I mean, I'm better to an extent, but it's not that I'm ever going to feel 100%. This knee problem that happened where my kneecap came out a few months ago, this happened to me when I was 17. That's the first time it happened. And, you know, I was playing sports and I banged knees with somebody and it came out and I had to go through this rehab and everything like that. So because it came out before, that means it's a higher chance of coming out again. There's nothing that's going to change that. Even if they did like a surgery, it's not going to change that. It's just something that is going to be affected for my whole life. First of all, sometimes I feel pain in it still. Even before it came out the second time, sometimes it just aches for no reason. Mm-hmm. But it's not most of the time, and it's not nearly as painful as when it first came out. Even the second time when it popped out and I was talking to people about it and they're like, wow, you're saying that so casually. I handled it casually too. I was on the ground. I'm like, I know this pain already. Mm-hmm. I know what happened. I know what the rehab process is like. So there's nothing for me to really cry about or, you know, I mean, I did let out a yell immediately when it happened, but
it hurts and you're frustrated.
Frustrated and the shock of the initial pain. But after that so it's perfectly goes with what you're saying. The first panic attack is like, the world is ending. I don't know what's happening. This is scary and I don't want it to happen again. And you're actually scaring yourself into more panic attacks, more anxiety symptoms. It just snowballs. It's like a fear on fear loop. And then after you get a hold of things and you're like, this is what's happening to me. I know what's happening to me. You can kind of talk to yourself. You can do deep breathing. You can listen to music. You can talk to a loved one, whatever it is that you use as your coping tools. And just not having that fear anymore automatically lessens the impact. Because I tell people I still have panic attacks, but they're not the type that I was having then. They're not like I have to run to the ER type thing. They're like, I have to slow down and breathe and just get through it and wait for it to pass.
Yep, absolutely. And even then, like for me, sometimes it's Tylenol. I shouldn't. And for a while, I had to take Tylenol a lot because there is, for me, physical pain attached to it. And I can feel the muscle tension because, you know, that's what anxiety is. It's just manifested in incredible tenseness. But yeah, I have a big bottle of Tylenol in our medicine cabinet waiting for those days, just in case. I always carry it with me just in case, too. It becomes too much. At least it's enough to kind of help calm me down. And to some effect, I think it's a placebo. Like I know when it's coming and I can feel that tension. If I take Tylenol, it's okay. Now I know the pain will go away. I don't recommend this to anybody at all. This is just me psychologically, and I don't take it as much now. But I think for a while it just was that I need to take Tylenol, and that's going to be my placebo, and that's going to be my miracle pill. But very much so, it was just stopping and kind of evaluating what is upsetting me. This day is going fine. Why all of a sudden am I having this panic attack? So just really thinking and reflecting to be able to identify the root cause of what the pain could be. And not necessarily the physical pain, because you know exactly where the physical pain is, but where the mental pain is that's bringing this up. So that way you can get yourself to that good spot and breathe and just kind of release that negative energy.
Yeah. So one of the things that I remembered, I wish I had my notepad because there's so many different things that are coming up. when we're talking about this stuff, we're kind of speaking the same language. You know, I don't really even have to explain too much because you, Cassandra, have experienced this, and Dylan, you've heard all about it. So it's not like I'm giving you something new. So there's not that layer of, oh, what's happening? You know, I don't really get it. But a lot of people experience these things and think nobody else does because they don't have people to talk to about it. They don't feel comfortable sharing with people. So I think it's really important what you said about breaking the stigma. As much and as far as we have come, the stigmas still exist. And I'm going to give you an example. I hope you're familiar with this situation. Naomi Osaka. Have you heard about what's happened with her in tennis?
Not offhand. Perhaps.
I'll tell you guys. She withdrew.
Sorry, was she the one that basically said that being a tennis player was stressing her the heck out, so she was disqualifying herself, essentially?
Yeah, she was in a major tournament. She's the number 2 tennis player in the world. And she was going through a depressive bout in the middle of a tournament or at the beginning of a tournament. She told them about it, and she asked them if she could forego the press conferences.
That was it.
Or I guess she told them, I shouldn't even say she asked. She told them that she was going to forego the press conferences. And they fined her. And then subsequently after that, she withdrew. So I started watching all these different videos and expecting that because she's a popular athlete, most people would be like, wow, I really at least sympathize with her. That must have been a tough thing to do. It was courageous. There was like a small percentage of people who were like that. And there was a lot more people that were like, you're a rich athlete. It's part of the job. This included fans and this included peers who were also playing. They're like, I deal with press conferences too. I don't always like things that people tell me in the press conferences either. And to me, it just kind of was a microcosm of what goes on in general.
That happened to the gymnast.
Simone Biles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Same thing.
And hats off to her. I don't know how old Naomi is, but Simone is still really young.
They're both in their 20s, like early 20s.
And for especially, and I say that generation like I'm super old, but I'm really proud of that generation of, celebrities that are speaking up about it because they truly are setting the tone for it. I remember reading about this Simone Biles stuff and how there was even a male tennis player had said, well, she just needs to get over herself and, work through it. And this is the expectation. And then a day or so later, he had a match that he lost and he threw the biggest
big old fit,
baby fit and refused to play any other matches that he was scheduled for, one of which was a team match where because he decided not to play anymore after losing this one match, his teammate didn't even get to play an Olympic game. And what about, sucking it up and going on, this is what you just tweeted to Simone Biles, but here you are throwing a fit in front of everybody and refusing to play anymore. Like, what is that? I mean, it's not right. And I think I feel bad for the celebrities who do have the eye on them, the Olympians, the athletes, movie stars, who are really, truly fighting to keep their sanity. What they do is not easy. No matter how much you're getting paid, it's not worth your health. It is not worth your life to keep pushing yourself beyond your limits. And the fact that there are those out there that are stepping up and saying, no, this was what's important to me. And, I want to be around for a while and I want to continue to do what I love. I want to continue to make music. So I'm going to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And if you can't understand that, I'm sorry, but this is what's important and it's what's right.
We seem to attach this kind of they make a lot of money, therefore they have to do the thing. And it's not necessarily the case. The fact of the matter is, no matter what someone's job is, if they are suffering from depressive moods or any mental health challenges, they deserve to have help, whether it's working as a manager at Disneyland, like we were, or whether it's, you know, being a tennis or gymnastics pro. Like, you still deserve positive mental health. And if you need to take a step away from your job for a minute, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, whatever that job is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We're watching this show called Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
It's an Apple TV series. It just like stole the Emmys recently. Like it did
last week or whatever. Yeah.
But in this season, they're really touching on Ted, the main character, who's played by Jason Sudeikis.
Yeah.
His mental health, because he's having physical panic attacks in the middle of. There's one where he has one in the middle of a game, a soccer game or a football game, because they're in the UK.
They're in England, yeah.
And they're touching on the reasons why he has it. And at first, they bring in a psychiatrist, a team psychiatrist, and he's against talking to her. He's like, because he had a really bad experience with a marriage therapist, and he thinks that all they're out for is to just like talk to you for 54 minutes and then get paid hundreds of dollars. And he refuses to open up. And we're getting to a point now in the series where he's like, this is what happened. Yeah. This is the trauma that I've been going through, and this is what I've been experiencing.
So powerful. It was, I mean, it's a comedy series. And the first season is very much just like nice person gets other people to be nice. But now the second season is looking like this is a nice person that we love, but this is what he's really dealing with. You know, you may see someone look happy on the surface, but you know, they showed his apartment in the episode that we watched the other night. And you see very clearly he's depressed.
Yeah. When he first starts out, the apartment's always nice and tidy, and now it's just a mess.
Yeah, there's open liquor bottles, there's trash everywhere. He's depressed and really suffering.
What I really enjoy about it is they're focusing on the main male character going through this, because I can't speak to it, so I would look to you, Mark, and Dylan too. Males especially are prone to not open up and talk, right?
Yeah.
Because you're told as you're growing up to man up, suck it up, tough it up.
Yeah.
And so you have to hide it. You have to mask it. You can't be weak. To show weakness, to show tears, to show emotion is a weakness. So the fact that they're making it the main character, and he's not some macho man, compared to others on the show, but he is a male figure who is portraying himself as having this mental illness. And they haven't called it out right, but you see outside of the panic attacks. But the fact that they're delving into it is incredible.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is. I mean, not to give too many spoilers away, but there was this beautiful scene where he, as he is opening up about what he's going through and the relationship he had with his father and what that all means, his therapist does something really beautiful, which is she asks him, she's like, I see the reasons why you hate him. Can you tell me something that you love about him? Tell me a good memory. I want to understand both sides of him, because he wasn't just this one person. And you can sort of see as the scene develops, it's probably the first time he's had a good memory about his father in a long time. And it really sits well with him in a beautiful way. And he even thanks his therapist for it afterwards, And so to see just the journey that he's going through, the tears that he's crying, and the suffering, is really beautiful.
Wow, that sounds like a great show. I need to check it out.
It's on Apple TV.
No one's seen it because no one has Apple TV Plus, but highly recommend. It's wonderful.
It is worth it if you ever want to do like a 30-day trial or something. And
yes,
watch
binge through. It's supposed to be a 3-season show. That was the original commitment. I don't know if they're going to try to go longer because it's doing well, but Jason Sudeikis has been pretty clear that he doesn't like being away from his family, stuck in England. So I think he wants to keep it at 3 years. We'll see.
It's a topic that you mentioned that gives me a lot of different feelings. Like, number one, yes, in my household, there was no kind of sharing emotions for me and talking about my feelings and things like that. That was something I just never did. Strong, silent type, as a lot of guys end up having to be in their households. But as an adult male with mental health issues, I was in a few experiences with physicians that demonstrated that stigma to me in such a way that was so damaging for me. I remember in particular this hospital that I kept going to for panic attacks. I had been there several times and they checked me for different things. And I guess the lady there was just tired of me. And she was just like, there's nothing wrong with you. We checked your chest, we checked your heart, your lungs. We did this x-ray, we did that thing, and everything came out negative. So she was like, man up. She literally said that to me in the hospital. She's like, man up. And the way that made me feel in that moment, when I came in there because I was having this terrifying thing that made me feel like I was dying, and somebody is telling me, man up at that time, I was like, there's no kind of validation for what I'm going through at all. I feel like I can't trust anybody to talk about this, because at home, my parents aren't understanding what I'm saying. They're trying, they're not people who didn't try, but they're not understanding what I'm saying. So they take me to this hospital. The hospital is telling me man up and sending me home without any kind of treatment, diagnosis, or anything. So I'm at home like, what do I do? And that led and translated into the agoraphobia that I developed, because when I was still in a better position and seeking the help, I wasn't getting it. So I think it's really powerful what you're talking about with that show. And I think a lot of TV shows and things are starting to implement men, talking about men and their types of struggles that they have, because there's a lot of, I guess, high functioning, I hate using that term, but like high functioning people who are a total mess in the household, but then they're able to go out to work and do these professional jobs, and their coworkers and their bosses and everything have no idea what's going on because they struggle and suffer in silence.
Yeah, I've been reading here and there about the concept of toxic masculinity a lot recently, and I feel like there's a big pushback from men because they feel like they're being attacked. And you're saying like the actions that I make are toxic, and that's not what the conversation really should be. Toxic masculinity is someone, regardless of their gender or sex, looking at you and saying you need to man up. That's what toxic masculinity is. It's negating your problems and just telling you to ignore them and be better than them when your problems are pretty crushing. And I think that we just need to accept that those concepts are what's toxic. That's what toxic masculinity really is. And we need to push back against that idea of just man up.
Wow,
and all
I
the things
never heard
like
that. That's really powerful what you just said. I never heard somebody say toxic masculinity is a concept rather than specifically saying like it's a macho man, or the typical things that people think of when they hear that.
Well, and that's just it. Like the macho behavior is toxic, but it was because that person was made to feel that that's the way that they had to express themselves. That those societal pressures, I think, is what is really creating this problem. We just need to like evaluate that from a systemic level, the way that we're doing with everything else right now.
With what you're saying, I could have taken what she said and gotten out of there and been real aggressive, because I'm like, okay, when I had my issue and I was at my lowest point and I came and I asked for help, the answer that I got was man up. So that could have made me just angry. Mm-hmm. And then I take that anger and that's what I start giving the world. Like they see me and I'm just this angry guy because I didn't have a proper way to express that emotion. When I was trying to express it to somebody, they were shooting it down and shutting it down and invalidating it. So you're right. I think that creates a really toxic kind of cycle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you guys are giving me some gems here.
What happens when you bring three great minds together, right, Mark?
Yeah. I remember when we were talking about Inside Out and how they learned about the value of all the different emotions, especially sadness.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times with the males especially, they try to act like we're just supposed to just only have certain emotions. We can't have sadness. Like that can't be a part of our lives. We just have to keep moving when things happen. But that's a really kind of dangerous game to play, because the emotions go somewhere. And for me, because they were not going anywhere outward, they were getting internalized, and it can change your body chemistry. It can create more adrenaline and different things that you need for like danger, you know, fight or flight and all that stuff, but it's happening in your body without you being in danger and just generating these panic attacks.
I was kind of thinking as you were saying there, like when someone loses one sense, another one gets stronger, right? When you lose your sense of sight, they say your sense of smell improves. And it's kind of that same idea, what you're describing. If you don't allow sadness to have its day, then anger usually gets a heck of a lot stronger. It's just kind of going a different direction.